We have discussed basic issues, but the real one that really has a problem lying under it is the exit of NATO troops. The question really is whether Afghanistan is ready for NATO troops to go and the security situation will stabilize after that. I would throw this question to Mr. Omar Samadi. He has to leave, yes, I know.
Thank you very much. This is, of course, we are in 2012 as it's ending. In 2014, as you all know, is the date set by NATO to withdraw from Afghanistan. And Afghanistan is facing three major transitions ahead between now and 2014. The one is the security transition from NATO to Afghan army and police and other security forces. That is going according to plan, even though there are some challenges. A latest survey that was published by the Asia Foundation 2 days ago gives a very positive perception from Afghan people, saying that they have very strong belief in their institutions, in their security institutions, and they are very hopeful about the future. The other transition has to do with what has been discussed a little bit, and that is the political transition. And that is very key to making sure that Afghanistan's political governance moves forward and that there is a peaceful transition of power when elections come up. In this context, I want to say something which also relates to reconciliation. The political transition and the political process in Afghanistan also has an angle that has to do with reconciling with Taliban and armed forces that are fighting. And if you ask the Afghan people what is the number one challenge and what is the number one obstacle to having a better future, they will point predominantly to security. And they will point to a lack of security in Afghanistan and the challenge posed by the Taliban and other armed forces. So the people of Afghanistan and the government of Afghanistan as well, even though I don't speak for the government, but their message is in return, well, if the Taliban have anything to contribute to, if they have a vision, if they have a program beyond what they have been talking about for 15 years now or more, then why don't they put their arms down and come and join? Ambassador Kazi is talking about reconciliation and taking, being inclusive. Every Afghan wants reconciliation to be inclusive, including Afghan Taliban. Nobody is saying that Afghan Taliban are second-grade citizens, and nobody is saying that they have no right as other Afghan citizens. That message has been sent very clearly to the Taliban who are hiding in Pakistan and to the Taliban who are fighting in Afghanistan, that they can be part of their country if they want to take part in the reconstruction. If they want to run for president, maybe you will have a Taliban contester too. I hope so. Then they are free to do so. Nobody is stopping them. But if they think that they want to be used for leverage and for hedging by somebody else, then they are mistaken. And they think that they can come and take over Afghanistan altogether as they did in 1996, again they are mistaken. And that is not going to be conducive to stability either in Afghanistan, in the region, or in the world. And I think that that is why we have to have a very long-term view of what we are facing. And I think the Afghan people have understood this very well. And I think that their message to the Taliban and others is, let's change the paradigm. Let's change the way we have been thinking for almost 20, 30 years. And let's work together in an inclusive manner. So that message is out there. We don't know if they are going to accept it and they're going to work on it or not. There's a bit of talk going on, but that talk is a very complex set of different players trying to find a solution. And the third transition has to do with economic transition. We do not want Afghanistan's economy to collapse. And we want to make sure that the young generation has hope that they can find a job and that there are opportunities in Afghanistan. And so these three transitions are interlinked, and this is what is going to preoccupy all of us and those who deal with Afghanistan over the next 2-3 years. And I am hopeful, I remain as an Afghan, I am hopeful that we will overcome these challenges as difficult as they are.
Thank you. Ms. Koufi, how would you look at the security situation? If NATO leaves in 2014, Afghanistan is stable enough that it can handle the internal security issues and threats?
Security is the main challenge, as it was said. But you know that when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, Pakistan and Iran hosted many Mujahideen parties. And lots of money from everywhere, but especially West, went to Afghanistan without checks, without specific criteria of how that money will be spent. Lots of money went to Afghanistan, to the region, to support Mujahideen party against Soviet Union, against the former Soviet Union, and against the Russians. And these Mujahideen groups received some part of that money. Other part of the money was actually used to promote radicalism in the region. Therefore, I think Ambassador Kazi is right in saying that this situation did not only affect Afghanistan, but also Pakistan social life as well. So this money was used to promote radicalism, and that radicalism became a potential threat for security in Afghanistan and in Pakistan. Because of the vulnerability Afghanistan has because of the long uncontrolled border with Pakistan and Iran, and because of the fact that there is the illiteracy rate is low, and also the economic opportunity for people in Afghanistan, but also for people in FATA area, is low. These are like potential security threats with the additional radicalism that is in grow in the region. And these potential risks, security risks, started appearing when the Taliban, when the civil war began, and after that followed by the Taliban regime. Personally, I believe that the war in Afghanistan is not an Afghan phenomenon. When Taliban first came to Afghanistan, and I am somebody who lived in Afghanistan luckily all my life. When I say luckily, because of the fact that I didn't live in Pakistan or Iran. When Taliban first came to Afghanistan, the message was that they would like to implement Sharia in Afghanistan and bring security. And with that message, many Afghans welcomed them because there was a civil war. Now they have a regional message. They're fighting in Afghanistan and in Pakistan for implementing Sharia. So I think they have become a regional phenomenon, or rather a global phenomenon, and that, therefore, they need to be addressed from a regional perspective. I know that there should be an internal reconciliation in Afghanistan, a political agreement, or a political inclusion in Afghanistan, political conclusion in Afghanistan that we have one approach when it comes to peace talks with Taliban. But in the meantime, I also think that unless our neighboring countries, both Pakistan and Iran, honestly, and also India, honestly don't get involved in this peace process in Afghanistan, peace cannot alone be achieved by bringing few commanders to power from Taliban. Because Taliban basically pursue a regional phenomenon. And Afghanistan has been a battlefield between all the regional powers. It has been a battlefield between what's happening in Pakistan and India. It has been a battlefield between what's happening between Iran and United States. So poor Afghans have always been a victim of terrorism. And therefore, I think a regional approach to the issue, and honest regional approach and inclusiveness of our neighboring country could be a solution.
Yeah. Well, if I may, two comments on 2014. First of all, I think it's important to emphasize that 2014 will not be the end of the history in Afghanistan. It will be just a new chapter, the chapter which will be written by the Afghans, probably with a sub-chapter co-authored by the neighbors. And as we move towards 2014 and beyond, I think it's again important to know that what Afghanistan is enjoying, indeed a unique relationship with the rest of the world. Chicago had committed 4.1 billion annually for the transitional decade for Afghan national security forces, mentoring and supporting, because we know that by 2014, Afghan national security forces, the army and police, will not be able fully to operate by themselves without financial support and mentoring. And that's where we're going to continue lending our support, including through the European Union, EU police mission, as well as paying the salaries for the policemen and increasing their civilian police capacity. Secondly, the Tokyo had presented another framework of mutual accountability of commitments from the Afghan side and the international community side of 16 billion euros for the next 5 years. Having said that, the scope and the deliverables of those commitments will depend on both sides, on international community, but a lot on the Afghan government. And that's where the accountability demand from the Afghan people come into play, and that's where elections will have a great significance. And last but not least, the 2014 will present a unique opportunity for Afghanistan and Pakistan to review and possibly to agree on a common narratives when it comes in dealing with extremism, when it comes in dealing with insurgency across the border, and when it comes to dealing in strengthening bilateral ties, building gradual trust, confidence, and mutual interdependence, which is of benefit to both of you. Thank you.
I will now move on to Mr. Philipp and then Kazi. Mr. Kazi.
Briefly on two things. First of all, security. It would be an illusion, I think, to believe that after 2014 all violence will stop in Afghanistan. There is a pattern of violence, unfortunately, a pattern which has developed in the last 30 years, and not all violence is insurgency violence in Afghanistan. There's criminal violence, there's organized crime, there's feudal sort of aggressive discussion, so to speak. So I think we have we will not see violence dropping dramatically after 2014. This depends on this, on the training and the standard of the Afghan National Security Forces. I think they are, as Madam Koufi just said, also they are on a good way. I mean, security forces are getting better. Army is getting definitely better, but also police now is going is improving. So I think that's a long-term perspective. Don't expect 2014 that the violence will stop, but it will certainly not increase either. I'm quite confident of that. Second thing, and that's a very important thing, when I speak about inclusiveness of reconciliation, I don't mean that the insurgency is being met and dealt with at the same sort of height and level. I have no doubt that this is the case. When I say, and I think this is the meaning of what we laid down in the Bonn document, when I say inclusiveness, that means I want the whole Afghan society participating in this reconciliation effort. It can't be the government only. I want parliament, we want, the international community wants parliament, civil society, women's organizations. The whole nation should participate in this exercise. And now let me tell you one thing. Afghanistan has quite an interesting experience in this inclusiveness, much better than in many other countries. We have seen also in the last years processes that bring together various angles of societies in a very skillful and traditional way. Lawyer Jirgas, for example, but also, like the High Peace Council also. So you see there is a very typically Afghan way of bringing society together. And that's important and paramount for this reconciliation effort. Otherwise, it won't be successful. I think it has to be dealt with the whole society.
Ambassador Kazi, if I may pose, is Pakistan ready for NATO troops to go leave Afghanistan in 2014, and Pakistan is confident that Afghanistan will be a much better place without NATO troops there?
Well, I mean, Pakistan naturally would look forward to withdrawal of NATO forces, but it is important that before the withdrawal, the different processes and transitions that are going to be, that are in place already, they are properly brought to a proper culmination. I think Madam Koufi made very important points, and I fully agree with her. It's very important to understand the historical context. Again, I go back. The Mujahideen culture is nothing new for Afghanistan. Mujahideen culture, it was on the basis of Mujahideen culture that Afghans fought the British in 19th century, in 20th century, when Pakistan was not even there. So don't blame Pakistan for promoting this. This was a kind of, it is something inbuilt in the Afghan psyche. I mean, there's, of course, in every society, there are different stratas of society. People have different understanding. So there may be some element, some section of the Afghan society which is very, enlightened, educated, but there is a large part, again, which has, very, traditional way of thinking. So it's very important to bring all these people, everybody on board in the process. Of course, during the Soviet in the struggle against Soviet occupation, the Mujahideen culture was further promoted, but it was nothing new. It already existed there. And now it is very important that the infrastructure that came into existence during the fight against the Soviet occupation is properly dismantled, and these people are properly rehabilitated in different ways. Economical rehabilitation. I think you have to. They have gone through a process of brainwashing. They have to be again brought into the mainstream. Otherwise, I think the process after 2014 will be very vulnerable to the happenings that will take place. The other important thing is to also take into cognizance that there is a tremendous disparity in the expenditure on the security side. Nearly $1 trillion has been spent on NATO forces and security element. And how much has been spent on the economic reconstruction of Afghanistan? It is a very small fraction of it. And I think this is something that we have to take it as a lesson, that what is needed is economic rehabilitation. It by itself solves a lot of problems.
And now we move on to Mr. Marc. And my one little footnote will be, how do you see this whole situation after green on blue attacks and lesser acceptance of US troops in Afghanistan by the people whom they are training, police and military personnel attacking, particularly American soldiers and officers?
First, since we're talking about reconciliation, I didn't mean to insult you when I gave up my time, so let's get that out of the way. Number two, I guess it's probably true because of my military background. I was, after all, in the military for 25 years. Herr Ackermann, dass ich es schwierig empfinde, aus dieser Rolle auszutreten, that I find it difficult to step out of that role. So I think a lot of the things you're talking about are true, and I think it's actually good. I don't mean this in an arrogant way, that Germany and other countries are taking the lead, because maybe the United States isn't the best country to take the lead on these issues. And maybe our role should be to be behind the scenes and to finance things in a kind of a quiet way. But since the question here was about ISAFs, of course I have to say that military people are concerned about that, and we all know it's true. It doesn't make it right. But we can't deny that that's a feeling. So as far as the green or the blue, I don't think the U.S. military is very pleased with the fact that while our casualties are being reduced, Afghani casualties are going up. It's a great concern. And it brings the issue of whether we, I'll speak now as we, as military, but I'm not speaking for the military, think that Afghanistan can handle it, if I may say it that way, Vice President Koufi, when it leaves. And there simply is a great deal of disagreement. The question of that it's not leaving, it's just a new chapter, I agree with. But in all fairness, I think the United States is trying to figure out its own role. And since our role has been so strong in ISAFs, we haven't quite defined how we want to do this. I know there are NGOs and others who have, but I think the U.S. military is still concerned. So the answer to the question is, the U.S. sees it with a great deal of concern, and so does the military. That's the short answer.
If you have to add anything, otherwise we are set for question answers, and the House will be open for questions. Tarek, Mr. Torek?
I was just saying that, very right. In the next 2 years, I think we have to really insist on the gains that have been made in terms of whatever little transparency there is in the economic realm in Afghanistan, whatever little human rights progress, and I think in human rights we have made a lot of progress, we have to preserve the media openness in Afghanistan. And these are a few things that, added with the advent of information and the fact that the young generation is really connected now on the internet, etc. Actually, when I talk to my friends in Afghanistan, all their concern is, can I go to an English class? Can I learn something new? Can I make a living? At the end of the day, this is going to be less and less about violence than personal, private citizen concerns to make a living and have a decent life and have security ahead. So I think the best thing that our Western friends can do in the remaining 2 years and after is to make sure that these gains are preserved.
We are open for questions, and please on this extreme right. Who else? We will have first round of questions and then answers.
Hello, my name is Jay Bestie. I'm a grad student at Ahmed University and a current member of the military of the United States. And I just wanted to ask about the stability in which the special representative had mentioned. You said that there needed to be 3 things that happened. The first of which was staying capacity for the international community. And Dr. Ellenbogen, regarding your comments earlier about the entrenchment of the United States, what do you believe the United States is going to be able to provide in terms of staying power? Second, you mentioned the support of neighbors, and for Ambassador Kazi, you didn't mention the Afghan government once. What does the Pakistani government and the Afghan government, what can you do in terms of cooperation to provide such stability? And then finally...
Thank you. Thank you. Enough for the day. The next. Are you ready?
Excuse me, I will give my question in French. So, la fragilité politique et l'enjeu sécuritaire de l'Afghanistan et du Pakistan est de taille. Donc il faut que la région s'adapte à ce nouveau changement, et le défi de l'année 2004 est celui de toute une région, celle du Moyen-Orient et de l'Asie conjointement. Donc la question que j'aimerais poser, quelles seront les alliances discutées dans la région après le retrait des forces américaines, et quel équilibre pourra-t-on envisager au niveau de l'équilibre des forces dans la région? Je vous remercie.
Will you direct this question to?
Je vous ai posé la question autour des nouvelles alliances. Ms. Koufi.
The question is, what would be the post-withdrawal scenario in terms of alliances and balance of power in the region?
Yes.
And this question is directed to Ms. Koufi.
Yes.
Well, as I said before, 2014 is important for Afghanistan, but also it's important for the region. Things could go wrong, but in the meantime, if Afghanistan managed to pass 2014, from 2014 to 2024 is called the decade of change. That means economy-wise, politically, and socially, it's expected that Afghanistan become a center of hope for the region, because it can be the other way around. It could be a potentially risk for the region and for the world. I think the role of regional country is crucial in that transition period, both security-wise but also economy-wise. Because, you know, Afghanistan, as said before, connects Central Asia to South Asia. Only a secure Afghanistan, a safe Afghanistan, will be able to meet the economy needs of the region. So therefore, it's in the interest of our neighboring countries to ensure that Afghanistan is a safe country. Second, politically, as I said before, radicalism is in growth in the region. In the meantime, there is this generation which would like to transform toward more modern democracy. We in Afghanistan experience both. We experience the extreme left during the Soviet invasion. We experienced the extreme radical and right during the Taliban. Both models didn't work, didn't respond in Afghanistan. So maybe neighboring countries and the regional countries could put hands together to promote democracy in Afghanistan, because that is the only way where Afghanistan could be a reliable partner to the regional country and to the world. And it could be also a country where its citizen could live in prosperity. And I think the neighboring countries could agree with that, with us on that. But what we need to do is now we need to find mechanism on how we could engage our neighboring countries, and our neighboring countries engage themselves more constructively in this process. The role of Western world, United States, is the leading and key in this, because we know that the United States came to Afghanistan when the New York attack, the 11th September attack happened, when their own security was at risk. That's why they came to Afghanistan. And we know that they understand the importance of security in Afghanistan, that once it gets worse, not only Americans, but Europeans and you also will not be safe in your own territory. So it's a common vision that we have to work with it. But now I think it's a time that we have to think how we could get to our reach our goals, but with a different approach maybe.
Right, Mr. Philipp.
Very briefly on your question, I think it's a very well-put question, because when we talk about the new world order, one thing is clear: countries can't deal on their own anymore. You have to have a sort of some alliances or some regional network. I was talking about this Istanbul process idea, where the region comes together and tries to build up a network of confidence. Because one thing has become clear in the last month and years to every single country of the region, that is that stability in Afghanistan is in their interest. Yeah? And that includes Pakistan, it includes Iran, it includes Russia and India. Stability in Afghanistan is of paramount importance. And that's c'est un intérêt commun de tous les pays voisins. And that, I think, is an extremely good basis for a regional enlargement. So I think we are on a good way in this regional sort of getting together and trying to constructively build up something. And there is what Dr. Ellenbogen just said. It's perhaps better if the West and the US in the lead then, withdraws and let the region try to deal with itself and look at it from a sort of a back angle that we are, financing something, we are helping, but the region has to get its act together somehow. But I see that there is a progress now. In 2014, as funny as it may sound, is perhaps also a good dateline, because people now understand that that NATO is withdrawing, or at least ISAF is withdrawing, and now they have to try to develop their interests on their own. And therefore, this Istanbul process is a good way forward, I think.
Now, Mr. Oshikjas and Mr. Kazi on the first question asked. We'll have another round of questions, so you can prepare yourselves.
I don't want to preempt the answer of Professor Ellenbogen about the US staying power. But what I can say from the European Union's perspective, that we are in Afghanistan for the long term. We are for the long term because our presence is driven not only by the belief and as a response to solidarity to the United States to make sure that Afghanistan will never become again the sanctuary for international terrorism, but also because we're here to eradicate poverty, and we're here in Afghanistan to ensure that the gains which have been developed throughout the last 10 years are preserved. Secondly, when it comes to the staying power of the US, I think I would suggest that we're going to be witnessing the shared staying power by all of us in a cooperative manner. I'm surprised that up till now we failed to recognize the increasing role of China in Afghanistan. If you look who is investing most, who is drilling the 2,000 barrels a day already, it's China. If you look who is stepping in with the development aid, it is China. And I think that's the role of China will increase in importance, and we'll have to find an accommodative way, a cooperative way as we move forward.
I think a number of global and regional mechanisms are already in play. The regional countries are meeting at the regional level. At the global level, there is a mechanism, bond mechanism. I mean, it is there. So these mechanisms have been in play for a very long time. What is very important that Afghan themselves have to look into themselves inside Afghanistan as to what has to be done to move forward. If the assumption is that what has happened between 2001 and 2012 is all in place, and those who are not part of that process, I mean, for them the doors are closed, I think we are going in a different direction, totally, altogether. You have to keep these doors open. Pakistan became independent country in 1947, but we had our first constitution in 1972. It is not easy to make a constitution of a country and build a consensus around it. We know from our experience it's not easy. I don't know if the constitution that has been, finalized and is in place in Afghanistan, and there is a faction within Afghanistan which has certain reservations, you close the door to them. You need to evolve a national consensus to move forward in every direction. Another important thing for the outside players is to support as much as possible economic efforts in Afghanistan. That is where the difference comes in. A lot of money has been spent on the security, by the NATO in the fight against whatever elements, but I think a very small fraction has been spent on the national reconstruction in Afghanistan. This has to be seen as
It's going to be very brief, I promise. On the reconciliation and the doors open, I don't know, I believe there is a limit for everything we do, and Afghanistan government, despite all the different views inside Afghanistan, have been pursued this peace process to the level that we paid a high price. There was a chain assassination of our leaders. The response we get from Taliban each time the Afghan government proposed a peace process is more violent, more suicide bombing, killing of more civilians. I think it's a time for Taliban also and for the countries in the region to think of what they also want and how they can, come back. I believe that they cannot come back with, and I made it clear in the beginning, with the same ideology in 1996 or 1992. So there should be somehow, they have to change. It's a time that they have to change views. They have to come and make it clear whether they want an Afghan girl to go to school. They will allow an Afghan girl to go to school. They cannot, continue to kill more people, and we give them more privileges and more opportunities. I think peace is a two-sided process. It cannot be a project. It's like democracy. It's a process that people participate.
At the height of our expenditures for military and other things, we were spending $50,000 per minute in Iraq, and it worked out to about $16 billion a month. Major Bessie, what I would hope that the President does, or the new SecDef, or the new Secretary of State, and I hope it's not the two front runners that currently are being talked about, that's my private point of view, we would take a part of that money and invest it in economic things in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, use soft power effectively, which the United States basically does 24/7 through corporate entities. I mean, some issues notwithstanding, labor policies and others which are sometimes criticized, but I would do more of that, and I hope that the government does that. And in our policy committees of the Democratic Party, there have been proposals in that regard. Whether the government will do it is unclear. Alliances. I said it in my last statement this morning. I'm concerned about the Chinese role. It isn't because I don't trust the Chinese. I know what they say to me in meetings. It's what they do after the meetings are over that bothers me. And, but they do it well. And in fact, they're hardly ever a topic, but then they continue to do it. So I'll be beat up by the Chinese again tomorrow. Every time I comment, they have some blogs against me. But the soft power has to take place. The Germans have to play a further role. The European Union has to play a role. And we need to split partly how we look at Pakistan and Afghanistan. Sorry, thank you.
That's all. We go to the second round of question, which is going to be the final one. There's a gentleman there. Anybody else for the questions? All right, in that corner.
Hello everyone, my name is Soufiane Mehdi and I have a question for Mr. USACKAS. Sir, you said that Afghanistan will be needing help from all the countries, especially the USA and the EU. My question is, will these two forces will be helping in creating that political vision that Mrs. Koufi talked about? If so, will that be serving the interests of these two forces? Thank you.
Can we have the second question as well? And this is the last question.
Hello, everyone. My question is, actually, we have been talking about the financial resources that they can help Afghanistan and Pakistan. Does really the money help in making the peace in the region? And like in which ways? Can't we think that the money can be used for by certain parties to in their interests? And just another question: and shouldn't we give like independence for Pakistan and Afghanistan to solve their problems, that can reduce the conflict between the region and like the US or other countries?
Who is this question directed to, if you can?
Anyone would love to answer the question. Thank you.
And there is one little question that we can have, and that's it.
My question is going to be in French. My question is in French. Nous savons que le monde en entier, là, développe plusieurs moyens pour maintenir l'ordre civil et le niveau de sécurité en Pakistan et en Afghanistan. Mais il y a aussi une paranoïa qui s'installe et qui s'enracine dans les imaginaires des citoyens du monde et vis-à-vis de cette région. Qu'est-ce qu'on pourrait faire pour changer ce cours des choses et changer la vision que prend cette région dans l'imaginaire des gens?
Can I just answer on the question for the European Union? Well, European Union's position towards Afghanistan is clearly defined. It's very much echoed by Fouzia's Koufi's vision. We are in Afghanistan to help to build the foundations for a sustainable economic development, to build the capacity for the Afghan national police, to build an inclusive and transparent democratic process, and to contribute to the regional development, which would move from the intransigency politics, conflicting national agendas, towards a greater interdependence, confidence and trust. I'm very pleased to report to you that our commitment is very solid and reliable. At the moment, we're negotiating the cooperation agreement for partnership and development between Afghanistan and 27, or soon 28, European Union member states. That agreement will commit both sides for at least 10 years to move forward in terms of economic development, political development, but also respect of human rights, especially of women's rights. We'll have a human rights dialogue in this respect, and we'll also have provisions which will cover aspects of investment protection, as well as trade provisions which would enable Afghanistan attract foreign investment and build a sustainable economic development. We're also negotiating a new financial perspective among 27 for the next 7 years. The current spending of EU with the member states together is over 1 billion euros every year, and we are committed to retain the current level of spending in the years to come. On the other hand, it will depend on how the Afghan government will meet the commitments derived from Tokyo Mutual Accountability Framework, especially in conducting elections in 2014, which is now already announced, how the Afghan government will deal with the corruption issues, including of Kabul Bank, how the Afghan government will demonstrate efforts to respect human rights, especially women's rights, and also address the justice sector as well as economic development. So we are here for the generation because we believe the formidable tasks which lie before Afghanistan people will require staying power, and I'm sure that the European Union will be beyond and behind Afghans. Thank you.
Can we move to Mr.
Yes, another thing that I think the West should do is to encourage that the Qatar and Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries have a bigger investment in peace and democracy in Afghanistan. Not only they have the financial resources, but their security depends on what's going on in the region. The end game in Iran is not played yet, but next 2 or 3 years there will be major changes there. And Syria is bleeding right now, as you can see. The involvement of the international community in this area of the world, let's say from Egypt to this area of Afghanistan and further, is going to continue for another 10 to 15 years. And the GCC, Gulf, Saudi Arabia, the wealthy countries are not putting their fair share of monetary investment. And in order for security to work in this area, they have to have a monetary investment in this security.
Yeah, Mr. Philipp.
Two brief answers to 2 questions. First is the money question. Very important point. Money as such is not enough. And what we have seen in the last 10 years was a mess, actually. You know, lots of money went to Afghanistan, and it was not spent wisely. Not all of it was spent wisely. And the mess is not because of the Afghans, it's also because of the very different ways of spending the money. Let me give you one example. Sweden and the UK, for example, they do it on purpose, giving the money to the Afghan government. The German government does it on principle in the other way around. We don't give the money to the Afghan government. The American State Department or USAID asks private companies to implement their programs. The German government has state agencies implementing their programs. You know, it's totally chaos on this front. So money as such is not something which will resolve the issue at the end of the day. But we have to find ways and means to channel and streamline the money flows, and that's what we are doing. Vygaudas just said it with the Tokyo framework. We're sitting in Kabul and trying to get some sense in this money spending. There's enough money. There's no shortage of money in Afghanistan. Even if we went, I mean, this is my personal point of view, if we went a little lower on the money front, if it was better spent, I think we had a more efficient way. But money as such is not helpful. We have to try to put it in a common way, in a sensible way. And the question of the paranoia question, which is an important question, I think, to be very frank with you, and I'm speaking on behalf of the German government right now, we have been trying to convince our media, media are the channel really trying to improve images of countries, to look in a differentiated manner to Afghanistan, to see what progress has been made and what is going wrong. It's useless and senseless. Why? Because as long as there are German military on the ground, they are only exclusively looking at military. So what we have is a reporting which is thorough and continuous, but only on military questions. So what you have is security incidents. Nobody writes about what's happening in Afghanistan other than these security incidents. I think that after 2014, we'll have the chance to see an improved and somewhat more differentiated image of Afghanistan. Thank you.
Final thoughts, 1 minute each, please, Mr. Kazi.
I think we see all over the world devolution of power within the countries. And Afghanistan has been a kind of a pseudo-federal society. The question was on how money well spent or not well spent. if the money goes to the regions and regions are empowered to implement different programs, I think that is where there will be more meaningful results. But if the monies are given through different layers, then my experience has been that only 20 or 30% gets to the people, and 80% or 70% goes back to the countries which are donating the monies. So it is very important that there's a devolution and the money goes right to the real pockets where it is to be spent.
Mr. Torek.
The international aid system has drawn quite a bit of lessons from how it works, and what the ambassador from Germany is saying is that now, after 10 years, we are looking at how money is spent in Afghanistan. I think that's a very good thing. I also point out to the private sector. In fact, the private sector has a lot of money in Afghanistan and in all these countries which you see in trouble. That money also needs to be encouraged to be invested within these countries. For that, we need security. But everyone has to have an investment, and the Afghans also have to have an investments. And all eyes should not be exclusively on outside. That's my message.
I think I still see there is a trust deficit between Afghanistan and its neighboring countries. And I think we need to look at the unsolved historical issues between the countries, that we still need to build trust and go to a genuine solution for those unsolved historical problems Afghanistan and the neighboring countries, namely Pakistan, have, and build a trust between the two countries and go for the roots of the conflicts in these countries. And second, I think radicalism is not in the interest of any country. The response to the new world would be democracy, and that's the only option we have in Afghanistan. And I'm happy to say here that despite the image of not only Afghanistan, but the women of Afghanistan to the world, which I always hear this word of poor women of Afghanistan. Let me tell you here that women of Afghanistan are poor in a way that they have had less opportunities, education, economy, opportunity, but women of Afghanistan are very strong, and they are part of the new Afghanistan. They are breaking taboos, they are bringing, I'm not saying revolution, but they are part of all the changes in Afghanistan, and no government can come to rule Afghanistan without seriously regarding women as the main players of the society. Thank you.
You are listening to the next president of Afghanistan.
Well, I hate to disagree with Fouzia Koufi, but I strongly, agree with the point that, it's not about the poor women of Afghanistan. It's about the best kept secret in Afghanistan. It's women and it's a youth. It's a new generation which will produce the change in this country, taking ownership and bringing new leadership, which will be much more accountable and which will restore the trust and confidence among the people.
Well, and to prove I'm not only a rattlesnake and still a Don at Oxford, I'll just use one quote from Robert Kennedy, which is, he said some men, but we see also women, and we should realize that. So I'll change it to, some people see things as they are and say why, but I dream of things that never were and say, why not? And that's my last comment.
We had a very fruitful discussion, all encompassing, and I hope we have answered some of the questions and maybe left some more questions. But some stereotypes with regards to the situation in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and its future, and their future, seems much clearer now compared to this before. We hope for a very good evening for you. Thank you very much for joining us here.